A new poll shows there is a front-runner in the Toronto race. So is this proof that voters are turning away from their choice of 2010? We dig into the numbers with Marcus G. Also, top tips on how to make sense of opinion polls. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Welcome to Globe Now. There's a question on the minds of a lot of Canadians and perhaps people around the world. Will Rob Ford be re-elected? Well, that'll be decided on October 27th. But a new survey by Nanos Research for the Globe and Mail and CTV News offers some clues about the state of the race. It suggests that John Tory is the front-runner among decided voters. He has 42% support among those surveyed. Compare that to Rob Ford with 28% and Olivia Chow at 26%. 4 years ago around this time, it was a very different story. Rob Ford was seen as the most trustworthy, most competent, and the best choice to represent Toronto. Well, all of that has changed, and it is now John Tory who leads in those categories. Well, to unpack these numbers, the Globe's Marcus G joins us now. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you.
What does John Tory have to do to hold on to his lead?
Well, I think he's probably going to start running a kind of front-runner strategy, which is to play it pretty safe. He's got a lot of traction with his so-called smart track transit plan of surface subways. And I think he'll bat away difficult questions about how it's financed and so on.
Now, when people were surveyed, most of them said it was transit and gridlock that represented the most important issue, in this election. I get the transit plan, but what about the gridlock? What is John Tory proposing in terms of, that commuter, who is stuck on the expressway and fuming in the car and the clogged roads? What's the vision there?
He's got a few ideas on that. He wants to have better coordination of road work projects, for instance, not doing the Lakeshore Boulevard and the Gardiner in the same summer. He wants to have more aggressive towing of delivery vehicles that block lanes. So he does have a few ideas. Now,
Rob Ford is unveiling more details about his transit plan, and he's talking subways, subways, subways. And I'm wondering, is this kind of strategy going to help him bridge that gap between him and the front runner?
He's certainly trying to push the subways thing. In fact, he came up with a new quote, one of my favorites today, which he was talking about subways, subways, subways. And he said, we have boring machines in the ground now to build one Eglinton subway. We just have to bore, bore, bore till the cows come home.
Interesting.
I thought that was a quote of the season so far. Subways are popular. The big question is how to pay for them. He's got a $9 billion plan. He has a few ideas of how to pay for them, but he's not talking about any kind of tax increase, which is probably going to be necessary to pay for subways.
Now, the poll also showed that 58% of those surveyed said Toronto's reputation has worsened. How does Rob Ford overcome that perception between now and Election Day?
Well, that's his weak spot, of course, because he's the one who's responsible for that fall in our reputation because of all these scandals that have adhered to him. Of course, his comeback is, look, I've been the best mayor ever. I've done great things. I've kept your taxes low. That's a personal issue. Don't even worry about that. And he's pretty forceful when he makes that message, so some people buy it.
I mean, to what extent do you think it's too early to talk about the drawing of an end in terms of the Rob Ford era?
Well, I was out canvassing with him last night in the northwest part of the city in a suburb, and he was kind of racing from house to house, looking kind of sweaty and almost desperate. You have to wonder what's going through his head. I mean, this is his whole life. He's been in civic politics for 14 years, and the polls are showing that unless there's some miraculous turnaround, it is coming to an end.
Now, there's going to be a lot of disappointment among Olivia Chow supporters. What does she need to do between now and Election Day, do you think?
Her campaign has lacked a certain energy over the summer. She's come across as sort of reasonable, but not very exciting, and sort of yesterday's news. She tried to turn that around this week by coming up with a new tax, a progressive tax, she calls it, on real estate, high-end real estate sales, perhaps trying to galvanize her left-leaning base by soaking the rich. Whether that will work, we'll see.
I wonder if there's some hope for Olivia Chow supporters in the idea that, maybe the frontrunner, just maybe, has peaked too early?
That's got to be a worry for John Tory because, of course, he's a politician who has seemed close to victory several times in his career and has not been able to close the deal. He famously flubbed his one chance at becoming premier with an unpopular policy that he brought in. That's why I think he'll be very careful about, his strategists will be keeping him well guarded, making sure he doesn't trip up. If you're the front runner, you just want to keep on going and not trip.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Marcus. Well, we want to hear from you. Who do you think is going to win on Election Day? Tweet us at Globe Now. If you want to hear from the candidates themselves, please tune in to our mayoral debate happening tomorrow at 12:20 Eastern Time. You can watch along live or watch it later online. So we're talking polls, and for the voter, it comes down to how much importance to give these surveys. Well, we reached out to someone who knows a lot about polling. Eric Grenier writes about politics and polls at 308.com, and he gives us his top tips.
As Election Day gets closer, you'll start to see a lot of polls, and they won't all look the same. So what do you need to do to interpret them correctly? First, focus on the trends. Polls will always have some small differences because of the margin of error. So look at where the numbers are going. If there's differences between pollsters on that, then you have some reason to be skeptical. And don't get too excited about gains of 1 or 2 points. Because of that margin of error, it's as good as no change at all. Second, don't compare apples and oranges. You can't compare one poll done with one methodology to another poll done with a completely different methodology. For example, if a new poll comes out showing a candidate has made gains from a previous poll that had been done by a different polling company, it might not mean anything. So don't focus too much on the small differences between pollsters. That said, assessing surveys from a wide variety of sources can give you a better idea of the bigger picture. Third, remember that polls are a snapshot from the past. A lot can happen in a few days. In the 2010 Toronto mayoral race, surveys done up to the last week showed it was a tie. But in the last polls of the campaign, Ford moved ahead. So when a new poll comes out, think about when it was conducted rather than when it was published. Ask yourself, has anything changed since then? And more importantly, might things change in the future? To get an idea of that, look at other information that is with the poll. Things like approval ratings, second choices, and what's motivating voters. That might give you a hint on how things could shift.
Well, that's all for today's show. If you've got a moment, hop onto Twitter. How much does your voting decision come down to the polls you're reading during election time? Tweet us at Globe Now. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Thanks for watching.